When I heard those words, I thought she was joking. But then I saw the ring, gold, still shining with the newness of something meant to last, and the way her eyes flickered. Just for a second, toward the hallway where my son stood. That's when my knees went weak. I remember clutching the edge of the kitchen counter, feeling the cool laminate press into my palms. My heart wasn't racing, it was sinking. Down into the pit of something dark and hollow. My daughter-in-law. The words didn't even sound right in my head. She smiled politely, that stiff, apologetic smile people wear when they've already done something and are only here to inform you. Double quotes, Mrs. Grant, she said softly. We got married yesterday. I heard the clock ticking on the wall. I heard the kettle whistling, but I didn't hear my son say a word. He just stood there, hands shoved deep in his pockets, like a teenager caught sneaking in after curfew. Except he wasn't 16 anymore. He was 31, my only child, my whole world. And suddenly he'd gone and built a new one without me. Before all this, our lives were simple, quiet, maybe even dull, but peaceful in the kind of way that makes you forget how fragile peace really is. After my husband passed 5 years ago, it had just been me and Daniel. We had our routines: Sunday breakfasts, blueberry pancakes for him, black coffee for me. We'd sit by the kitchen window, the one that looked out at the old oak tree his father planted before he was born. Daniel was my pride. Always had been. Smart, gentle, with that kind of kindness that draws people in. He'd always said, "Mom, when I meet the right woman, you'll love her too." And I believed him. When he moved out last year, his first real move since college, I pretended I was fine. I helped him pack boxes, labeled his dishes, even ironed his shirts for the new job in the city. I smiled at him from the doorway, waving as he drove away. Then I went inside, sat on his unmade bed, and cried into one of his old t-shirts until it smelled more like me than him. He visited every other weekend at first, called me every night for a while. Then the calls came every few days. Then every week. Then they stopped. I told myself he was just busy. That's what mothers do, you know? We make excuses for the silence because we can't bear to admit the distance might be intentional. The first time he mentioned her, his voice changed. "Mom, I met someone. Her name was Clara. She worked at the same tech company as him. A marketing manager, organized, ambitious. Really funny," he said. When I asked if I could meet her, he laughed it off. "Soon, Mom. She's a little shy." A little shy turned into months. I only saw glimpses, a shadow in the background during a video call, a pair of shoes by his door when I dropped off soup, a perfume I didn't wear lingering in the hallway. Something about it all felt secretive. And maybe that's why, when she finally appeared on my doorstep that morning, wearing a white dress and holding my son's hand, I already knew. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. I think I smiled. God knows why. "Oh, congratulations," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "Yesterday, you said." Clara nodded, looking down. It was small. Just us and a witness. My son still hadn't said anything. He couldn't even meet my eyes. I felt the air between us grow thick. The smell of coffee and toast turned sour. I wanted to ask why. Why not tell me? Why not let me be there for the happiest day of your life? But when I finally found my voice, what came out was softer than I intended. "I hope you're happy," I whispered. And then I did the only thing I could do. I turned away before they could see the tears spill over. The next few days passed like a dream. One of those dreams where everything looks normal but feels wrong. I kept expecting a call, an apology, something to make sense of it. But instead, I got an envelope. It arrived on a Tuesday, thin and official looking, with Daniel's handwriting on the front. Inside was a short note and a copy of a prenuptial agreement. "Mom, I wanted to make sure everything is clear, legally. Clara and I signed this before the wedding. You don't need to worry about the house or Dad's estate. It's all settled. I'll call soon." Settled? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. The estate? My husband's legacy? The land we'd worked for? The house Daniel grew up in? Settled without a single conversation that night. I sat at the dining table under the dim yellow light. The prenup spread out in front of me. My husband's picture hung on the wall beside it. I could almost hear him sigh. The next morning, I decided to call Daniel. He didn't answer, so I tried again. And again. Finally, late that evening, my phone buzzed. "Mom," his voice said, low and careful. "I was going to call you tonight. Were you?" I asked. Silence. "I didn't want you to find out like that," he said finally. Clara thought it was best to keep it simple. "No big family drama." "Family drama," I repeated, my voice shaking. "I am your family, Daniel." He sighed, and for the first time, I heard irritation. "Mom, please don't make this harder. You know how you get when things change. Clara and I just wanted to start fresh. We'll visit soon, okay?" The call ended with that word again, soon. I sat there, phone in my lap, staring at the blank wall where the clock used to hang. I'd taken it down earlier that day because the ticking was too loud. Now the silence was louder. That night I didn't sleep. I walked through the house barefoot, each floorboard creaking like a sigh. In the living room, I ran my fingers over the framed family photos. Daniel in his graduation cap. Daniel as a boy holding a fishing rod with his father. He used to smile at me in those pictures. Now, I wasn't sure he'd even look me in the eye. Something in me shifted that night. It wasn't anger exactly, more like grief, the quiet kind that doesn't wail or break things, but just settles. Still, a question began to grow in my chest. What really happened between them? Because if Daniel was capable of cutting me out of his wedding, maybe there was something or someone convincing him to, and I was going to find out. It started with small things. A change in tone when Daniel called, the way he said we instead of I. We've been busy lately. Mom, we might not make it this weekend. We think it's better if you rest more. We, a word that used to make me happy. That meant he'd found someone to share life with. Now made me feel like an outsider in my own family still. I tried to be understanding. That's what mothers do. We forgive before we're even asked to. So when he finally agreed to bring Clara for dinner one Sunday, I told myself it was a chance to start fresh. I spent the entire day cooking roast chicken with rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, a lemon pie Daniel's favorite since he was 12. I even set the table with the good china. The set I'd been saving for when he brought home the woman he was going to marry, except he already had they arrived just before 6. I heard the car door slam, followed by a few quick footsteps on the porch. When I opened the door, Clara was there, holding a bouquet of white lilies, too perfect, too polite. "Hi, Mrs. Grant," she said. "Thank you for having us." Her voice was soft, careful, the kind of voice that measures every word before it leaves the mouth. Daniel followed behind her, hands full of grocery bags, eyes avoiding mine. "Hey, Mom," he said, smiling faintly. "You didn't have to cook so much." "I wanted to," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my tone. "It's been a while." Dinner began like any other family gathering should, but the air was thick, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Clara asked polite questions about the garden, the weather, my volunteer work at the library. She smiled at all the right times, but every now and then her eyes would flick toward Daniel like she was checking for approval. He barely looked up from his plate. When I asked about their wedding, Clara gave a vague answer. "We wanted it simple, intimate." I nodded, but something about the way she said it, "we wanted it simple," felt rehearsed. After dessert, Daniel went to the kitchen to help with dishes, leaving me and Clara alone in the living room. For a moment, there was only the sound of the clock ticking, the one I'd finally hung back up because I couldn't stand the silence anymore. Then Clara spoke. "I know it was sudden," she said, her voice calm, "and I understand it must have hurt you not being there." I looked at her, waiting. She folded her hands neatly in her lap. "But Daniel and I, we needed to make decisions for ourselves. You've been through a lot since Mr. Grant passed, and we didn't want to add to your stress. Add to my stress." The words stung, like she was talking to a fragile old woman instead of a mother. "Clara," I said slowly, "I don't need protecting. I just wanted to be part of his life." She smiled, polite again, almost kind. "Of course. We both want that too, but we're building our own path now." It was a simple sentence, but the way she said our, it sounded like a line drawn in the sand. When Daniel came back, she stood and took his hand. "We should go. It's getting late." And just like that, the night was over. I stood at the door as they left, watching the taillights fade down the street. The lilies she'd brought sat on the counter behind me, their scent too sweet, almost nauseating. That's when I noticed it, the envelope sticking out of Daniel's coat pocket as he turned. It fell slightly as he bent to kiss my cheek, and I caught a glimpse of the letterhead. Fisher and Lowe Attorneys at Law. My stomach tightened. The next morning, I drove into the city. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't even tell my friend Miriam, who usually knew everything before I did. I just got in my car and drove, the letterhead name repeating in my mind like a heartbeat. Fisher and Lowe, they were our family's old estate lawyers, the same ones who'd handled my husband's will years ago. When I walked into the office, the receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Grant, it's been a while." I smiled faintly. "Yes. I was just hoping to confirm if there's been any recent updates to our family file." Her expression shifted. "Updates?" She hesitated, then said, "I'm not sure what I can share without your son's consent, but I'll have someone check." I waited, palms damp against my skirt. After a few minutes, she returned with a folder, slim, new, labeled Daniel and Clara Grant. Joint Estate Review. Joint Estate. My heart sank. I thanked her and left my mind spinning. So it wasn't just they'd been in touch with the lawyers too, reviewing assets, adjusting names, rewriting legacies. By the time I got home, I couldn't feel my hands. I sat in the car for nearly an hour, staring at the dashboard. Was this Clara's influence? Or had Daniel truly decided to cut me out piece by piece, quietly, without confrontation? Either way, I needed to know the truth. That evening, I called him again. This time, he answered, "Mom." His voice was wary. "Daniel," I said, trying to keep calm. "I stopped by Fisher and Lowe today." Silence. Then a quiet sigh. "You shouldn't have done that, so it's true," I asked. "You're changing the estate?" "Mom, listen," without even talking to me. He sounded tired. "It's just practical stuff." "Okay." Clara and I needed to sort things out. "It doesn't change anything for you. It changes everything for me," I said, my voice trembling. "Your father trusted you. He trusted us. And now you're letting someone you barely know rewrite his legacy." He didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, "Clara's my wife now. I have to think about her too." That was the first time he'd said it out loud. "My wife, ... It hit harder than I expected. "I hope she's worth it," I said finally. "Because you're losing more than you realize." The line went silent. Then the call ended. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't think. I sat by the window watching the streetlights blur through the rain, wondering when love between a mother and son had become a transaction, something to be signed, notarized, and neatly filed away. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and the anger, a small voice whispered that this wasn't just Daniel's doing. Someone else was steering this, and I was going to find out who and why the next week. I got my answer, or at least the first piece of it. I was out in the yard that morning, trimming the rose bushes when Miriam pulled up. She didn't even bother with her usual cheerful wave. She got out of her car, holding her phone like it was evidence. "Have you seen this?" she asked, marching up the path. I frowned. "Good morning to you too, Miriam," she sighed, thrusting the phone into my hands. On the screen was a photo, Daniel and Clara, smiling at some event, Clara's hand resting on his chest, a sparkle of diamond catching the light. The caption read, "Tech Couple of the Year. Daniel Grant and Clara Fisher celebrate new partnership." "Partnership?" I asked slowly. "Not just marriage," Miriam said. "Apparently she's part owner of his new startup. Fisher Media, her father's the investor." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Fisher, the same name from the law firm. I handed the phone back, my mouth suddenly dry. "So she's his business partner too?" Miriam nodded grimly. "Looks like it." I didn't say anything. I just turned back to the roses, snipping thorns that had grown too close together. She stayed for tea after that, though. Neither of us drank much. I told her bits and pieces, the wedding, the prenup, the visit to the lawyers. She listened quietly, shaking her head every so often. "You know," she said finally, "sometimes people like that Clara, with money and connections, they know exactly how to make someone feel dependent." I looked out the window. The lilies Clara had brought were still there on the counter, wilted and browning at the edges. "She's already done that," I said softly. Over the next few weeks, Daniel barely called. When he did, the conversations were short, polite, like two strangers discussing the weather. I kept myself busy. I cleaned the house, rearranged furniture, baked too many loaves of banana bread I never ate. Anything to fill the silence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. Something more than just my son. Then one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter. It was from Clara. Her handwriting was neat and elegant, the kind that curls delicately at the edges, the kind of handwriting that looks practiced. "Dear Mrs. Grant, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to reach out personally. Daniel and I have been thinking about the future, and we'd like to make sure everything is clear and comfortable for you. We're planning to sell the family house in the coming months and move you into a new apartment closer to us. Something easier to manage. We'll take care of everything. You don't have to worry about the details. With love." Clara read it twice. Then a third time. "Sell the family house. Move me." My hands were trembling by the end. That night, I called Daniel again. No answer. I left a message.com, composed but with an edge he'd recognize. "Daniel, I got Clara's letter. Call me before you make any decisions. This isn't just a house. It's our home." He didn't call that night, or the next day. But 2 mornings later, he showed up. He didn't knock. He used his old key, the one he still had on his key. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard the door creak open. "Mom." I turned, drying my hands on a towel. "Daniel." He looked nervous, eyes darting around the room like it was unfamiliar territory. "Got your message?" he said. "Thought we should talk in person." I nodded toward the table. "Sit." He sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, a habit from when he was a boy and knew he'd done something wrong. "Mom, the house is old," he began. "It's too big for you. The maintenance alone, this house I cut in, was built by your father's hands. Every wall, every corner. You took your first steps here. You said your first word in that hallway, and now you want to sell it like it's inconvenient. He flinched. It's not like that. Clara just thinks, Clara, I said sharply. It's always what Clara thinks. He met my eyes for the first time then, and I saw it. The hesitation, the guilt, but also something else. Fear. She's not trying to hurt you, he said, quietly. She just wants to make things easier for everyone. She worries about you being alone out here. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. And what do you want, Daniel? He hesitated. I want peace. I don't want to be in the middle. You already are. For a long moment, we just sat there, mother and son separated by more than distance. Finally, he stood. We'll talk again soon, okay? He left before I could answer. The sound of the door closing behind him felt final. That evening, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at the empty space where his childhood toy chest used to be. I could still picture him there, building little towers from blocks, grinning when I applauded somewhere between those blocks and this moment. I'd lost him, but I wasn't about to lose everything else too. If Clara thought she could quietly dismantle my life, move me like a pawn, erase my husband's memory from our home, she was mistaken. I might have been quiet. I might have been polite, but I wasn't powerless. The next morning, I called Mr. Halbrook, our old family lawyer, retired but still sharp as ever. Margaret Grant, he said warmly when he picked up. Haven't heard your voice in years? What brings you to an old man like me? I took a deep breath. I think someone's trying to take my home, Harold, and I need to make sure they can't. Start from the beginning, Harold said, his voice calm but alert. So I did. I told him everything. The surprise marriage, the prenup, the estate review, and finally Clara's letter about selling the house. He listened without interrupting, the faint scratch of his pen marking notes in the background. When I finished, he let out a long, low whistle. Well, he said finally, they've certainly been busy. I waited, clutching the phone. Can they do it, Harold? Can they sell the house? He sighed. Not without your consent. Not legally. But if your son's name is on the deed and he's being influenced, his pause said enough. What do I do? I asked quietly. For now, he said, you protect your share. I'll draw up an amendment to secure your rights to the property. It'll make it harder for anyone to make changes without your explicit permission. And Margaret, yes, don't confront them just yet. Let me handle the paperwork first. Keep calm. Keep quiet. I promised I would. But I also knew myself. Keeping calm was one thing. Keeping quiet was another. A few days later, Clara called Dot. It was the first time she'd ever called me directly Mrs. Grant. She began sweetly. I wanted to check if you got my letter. Daniel's been worried it's not good for you to live alone out there. I bit my tongue. I got your letter, Clara, and thank you for your concern. But I'm quite comfortable in my own home. She paused. I understand. Change can be hard, especially after a loss. Her tone was syrupy, sympathetic in that polite, distant way. You mean my husband? I asked. Yes, she said softly. Daniel told me how close you two were. It must be difficult, letting go of the past. That did it, Clara, I said, voice firm but measured. I've lived a long time. I've buried a husband, raised a son, and paid for every brick in this house with sacrifice. So please don't confuse my silence for weakness. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she let out a faint laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Of course, Mrs. Grant, she said smoothly. We're all just trying to do what's best for Daniel. The call ended there, but something about the way she said we, like I wasn't part of that circle, burned into me. A week passed before I heard from Daniel. Again, he came by unannounced one Saturday, holding a bag of groceries like a peace offering. I brought you some things, he said. Thought you could use them? He looked tired, not physically, but emotionally that drained. Uncertain kind of tired that comes from living in two worlds at once. I smiled politely and took the bag. Thank you, Daniel. We sat at the table again, the same one where we'd argued weeks before. The silence between us was thick, but softer this time, less sharp, more weary. Mom, he said finally, I know you're upset, but Clara's not the enemy here. She wants structure. She likes things done right. I looked at him closely. And you? He hesitated. I just want peace. Peace doesn't come from silence. Daniel, I said quietly, it comes from honesty. He didn't reply, just stared down at his hands, the same hands that used to build model airplanes, that used to wrap around mine when we crossed the street. For a moment, I almost reached out to touch them, but then I remembered the letter, the prenup, the estate. So instead, I said gently, do you love her? He looked up, startled. Of course I do. Then make sure she loves you, not what you have. He stood up, frustrated. You don't know her, Mom. I know what it looks like when someone starts cutting ties, I said. First, it's small things. A missed call, a hidden document, a softened truth. Then one day, you wake up and realize you've signed away everything that mattered. He opened his mouth to reply, but the sound of a car horn interrupted him. Clara's car, she was waiting in the driveway. Her window rolled down Daniel's side. I have to go. Of course you do, I said quietly. He leaned down to kiss my cheek, but I turned away. It wasn't intentional, it just happened. My body flinched before my heart could stop it. He hesitated, then walked out without another word. Through the window, I watched as Clara smiled at him. Touching his arm as he got in, the car pulled away, and with it, my son again. That night I signed the documents Harold sent over. They secured my ownership and made any future sale nearly impossible without my written consent. It gave me a strange kind of comfort, not because I wanted to fight, but because I needed something solid to stand on. But comfort didn't last long. A few days later, Clara showed up at my doorstep. Alone, she was wearing a beige coat, her hair perfectly in place, a small clutch tucked under her arm. Her perfume hit me before her words did. Jasmine and something sharp beneath it. Clara, I said, surprised. Daniel's not here. I know, she said with a small smile. I came to see you. I stepped aside reluctantly. Letting her in, she looked around the house, her gaze sweeping across the photos on the mantel, the worn sofa, the framed certificate from Daniel's high school graduation. You've kept everything, she murmured. It's like time stopped here. I folded my arms. Maybe I like remembering where I came from. She turned to me, her smile polite but tight. I understand, but nostalgia can hold people back. Daniel needs to move forward. We both do. That's why I think selling the house is the right choice. Her tone was matter-of-fact, businesslike. I met her gaze evenly. You might be married to my son, but this house isn't yours to decide over. Something flickered in her eyes. Irritation, maybe. Mrs. Grant, we're just trying to help. You can't stay here forever. Daniel worries about you. Then he can come see me, I said. He doesn't need to sell my home to care for me. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a second, the facade cracked. I saw the steel beneath the sweetness. Then she smiled again. Well, she said, adjusting her coat. I tried. I'll let Daniel know we spoke. And just like that, she turned and walked out. The door clicked softly behind her. But the silence she left behind was deafening. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty hallway. Then, I whispered to myself, let's see how you handle no for an answer. Because something told me, Clara Fisher. Grant wasn't the kind of woman who liked hearing that word. I didn't hear from Clara for nearly 2 weeks after that visit. No calls, no texts, no letters this time. The quiet was strange, almost like the house itself was holding its breath. Every morning I'd half expect to see her car parked outside again, that cold beige sedan idling at the curb like a warning. Instead, there was only silence. Until one afternoon, I came home from the market to find the front gate slightly opened at first. I thought I'd just forgotten to latch it. But when I walked up the steps, I noticed the mailbox had been left ajar too. Inside was a thin envelope, no return address. I tore it open. It was from the real estate agency in town. A polite notice thanking Mrs. Grant and Mr. Daniel Grant for their inquiry about listing the property. My heart stopped. I read it again and again, each word sinking like a stone. Inquiry listing estimated value. Commission rate. They'd tried to list the house. Behind my back, I sat down at the kitchen table, letter trembling in my hands, the groceries still in their bags. For a moment I couldn't think straight, just a dull ringing in my ears. Then anger came, quiet and clean. I took a breath and reached for the phone. Harold, I said when he picked up, they've gone too far. He didn't sound surprised. What happened? I read the letter aloud. He exhaled sharply. They must have used Daniel's name on the inquiry. They can't move forward without your signature, but they're testing boundaries. Testing, I repeated. That's one word for it. Margaret, he said carefully, this might get messy. Are you prepared for that? I looked around the kitchen, the faded wallpaper, the dented kettle, the family photos smiling back at me. Double quotes. Yes, I said quietly. I'm done letting them draw the lines. That evening I called Daniel. He answered on the third ring. His voice was flat, cautious. Mom? Daniel? I said. Steady? Did you or Clara contact the real estate agency about my house? He hesitated, and in that silence I already had my answer. She just asked for an evaluation, he said finally. Nothing's been done. An evaluation? I repeated. Without telling me? Mom, it's not Daniel. I cut him off. Do you remember when your father and I signed this deed? You were 16. You stood right here in this kitchen holding the pen for me. You said one day you'd build your own home, not take mine. Mom, please, no, you listen to me. I don't know what Clara has told you, but this house isn't just walls and bricks. It's memories. It's your childhood. It's your father's work. It's me. There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, she just thinks we should plan ahead. For your future. In case something happens, I laughed bitterly. Something has happened, Daniel. You married a woman who's trying to erase me? That was when his tone changed. Harder now, defensive. You're being unfair, he snapped. Clara's trying. She's the only one who's been practical about things. You've been so emotional lately, Mom. Emotional. My voice cracked. You think protecting my home is emotional? I think you're making this harder than it has to be, he said, his voice rising. I can't keep doing this, Mom. Every time I try to balance things, you make me choose. Maybe it's time you did, I whispered. He was silent again. Then, fine, he said. If you won't work with us, we'll figure it out ourselves. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, and let the words echo in the quiet house. We'll figure it out ourselves the next morning. I went to Harold's office in town. He looked over the real estate letter and nodded grimly. We'll file a restriction order. It'll stop any transaction without your express consent, and I'll send a formal notice to the agency. They'll back off immediately once they know the legal status. Do it, I said. And send a copy to Daniel. He hesitated. Are you sure you want him to see it? It might escalate things. I looked out the window where the town square shimmered under the afternoon sun. I'm sure, I said. If I don't draw the line now, there won't be anything left to defend later. That night, I found myself sitting in the living room long after dark, the documents spread out on the coffee table. The grandfather clock ticked softly in the corner. The air smelled faintly of dust and lemon oil. I thought about Daniel, how he used to sprawl on that very carpet, building towers from wooden blocks while I watched from the sofa. He'd always been a gentle child, sensitive, eager to please. Somewhere along the line, he'd learned to please everyone but himself, and now, I wondered if Clara saw that too, if that was what she'd fallen in love with, or if that was what she'd used. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts when I opened it. Daniel was standing there. He looked worn, his eyes red-rimmed, his posture slumped. Mom, he said softly, can I come in? I stepped aside. Of course. He walked in slowly, glancing around the house like it was unfamiliar territory. He stopped by the mantel, picking up an old photo of him and his father at the lake. Clara told me you filed something with your lawyer, he said. I did. He nodded, still looking at the picture. I wish you hadn't done that. I wish you hadn't given me a reason to, I said gently. He turned to me, his face a mix of frustration and hurt. You think I don't love you anymore? I looked at him for a long time before answering. I think you forgot how to love without permission. He flinched. I didn't marry Clara to hurt you, he said quietly. I just wanted to build my own life. I wanted that for you too, I said. But independence doesn't mean erasing the people who helped you get there. He rubbed his forehead, sighing. She thinks you don't trust us. She's right, I said. Because trust isn't given, it's earned. And right now, I don't know which version of you I can trust. He looked away. I don't know either, he admitted. We stood there in silence, the air heavy with everything we hadn't said. Then he said softly, I'll talk to her. I'll fix this, Daniel, I said. Fixing it doesn't mean choosing sides. It means being honest with her, and with yourself. He nodded, his shoulders sagging. I'll try. As he turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something raw in his eyes, shame, maybe, or fear. When the door closed behind him, I whispered to the empty room, You'd better, son, because next time I won't be here to save what's left. For the first time in months, I slept deeply that night, but morning brought a different kind of quiet one that felt like the calm before a storm. Something told me Clara wasn't done yet, and I was right, because 2 days later, a letter arrived that would change everything. This one wasn't from a lawyer or a realtor. It was from Daniel, and inside was a single handwritten line. Mom, I've decided to move out of state with Clara. Please don't try to stop us. I read that letter a dozen times, each word carving deeper into me like a knife. Move out of state. Don't try to stop us. There wasn't even a signature, just Daniel's name scrawled in that rushed, uneven handwriting I'd known since he was 10. I sat there at the kitchen table, the morning light spilling over the paper, my coffee turning cold beside me. Outside, the wind carried the sound of the neighbors' wind chimes, soft, careless, almost cruel in its calm. So that was it. After all the arguments, the pleading, the tears I'd swallowed to keep peace, he was leaving. And not just leaving, he was choosing to walk away. I thought of the boxers I'd helped him pack when he first moved out years ago, how I'd labeled each one in my neat handwriting, kitchen, bedroom, memories. I'd cried quietly then too, but I'd told myself it was natural. Children grow up. They make lives of their own. But this wasn't the same. This was erasure. He wasn't just leaving my home. He was leaving me that night. I couldn't sleep. I paced the house until dawn, my mind looping through every conversation, every warning I'd ignored. Finally, around 6, I sat at my desk and began to write. If Daniel wanted to move away, I couldn't stop him, but I wasn't going to let him leave under Clara's version of the truth. So I wrote him a letter. It took hours. My hand cramped halfway through, but I kept going. When I finished, I read it aloud to the empty room. Daniel, I've made my peace with the fact that you're married. What I haven't made peace with is how you've let someone else speak for you when you were little. You used to tell me the truth even when it hurt. You once admitted you broke my vase because you couldn't stand lying. I hope that part of you still exists somewhere under all this. You have every right to build your own life. But remember, family isn't a choice you make. Once it's a choice, you make every day. Don't lose yourself trying to be someone's version of loyal love. Mom. I sealed it and dropped it in the mailbox before I could change my mind. And then, I waited, days turned into a week. No reply. No call. No sign. Then, one morning as I was watering the plants by the porch, I heard a car pull up. I looked up, heart pounding. It was Daniel, alone. He got out slowly, his eyes tired but clear. He was holding something in his hand, my letter folded and worn. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I nodded. Stepping aside, we sat in the living room. The same silence, but softer now. I read your letter, he said finally. Twice? I waited. You were right, he said, voice low. About everything. I swallowed hard. She asked you to leave, didn't she? He hesitated. She said she couldn't live here anymore, that I had to choose between peace and guilt. I felt that like a punch. And what did you choose? He looked at me, then really looked like the boy I used to know was somewhere behind those tired eyes. I haven't decided yet, he said quietly. That's why I came. I leaned back, studying him. You came here to ask me what to do? He shook his head. No. I came here to remember who I was before I forgot. The words hit me harder than I expected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another letter crumpled, its envelope already torn open. She found your message before I did, he said. She read it, and she got angry. Said you were trying to manipulate me. I stayed still. And what did you think? He sighed. I think she's scared. Scared of losing control. Scared of not being enough. Daniel, I said softly. Fear doesn't excuse control. You can't build love out of permission. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I told her I needed space, he said. That I wasn't ready to move away yet. She didn't take it well. How bad? I asked. He hesitated. She left, packed a few bags and said she'd go ahead without me. Said I could come when I'd sorted my loyalties. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that sink in. When I opened them, I saw something in Daniel I hadn't seen in months. A kind of clarity. So what now? I asked. He shrugged weakly. I don't know. I feel like I've been living in someone else's story. Then write your own, I said quietly. He looked up. Even if it means I lose her. Son, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. If someone makes you choose between love and family, you're not losing them, they've already left you. His fingers tightened around mine, and for the first time since his wedding day, I felt him come back not as the man Clara wanted, but as the son I'd raised for the next few weeks. Daniel stayed in town. He didn't move back in, but he visited often. We took walks by the lake, cooked dinner together, talked about nothing and everything. He told me stories about Clara, how charming she'd been at first, how slowly things had changed, how every disagreement became a test of loyalty. She's not a bad person, he said one evening. She just doesn't know how to love without control. I nodded. And you don't know how to live without trying to fix people. He laughed softly. Guess that's something I inherited. Maybe, I said. But there's a difference between fixing and forgiving. A month later, I got another letter. This one wasn't from Daniel or from Clara. It was from a law firm in another state. Clara had filed for separation. No explanation. No accusation. Just a clean, detached request for space. Daniel read it over dinner. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just exhaled, long and slow. Well, he said finally, I guess that's my answer. I reached across the table, resting my hand on his. Sometimes peace comes disguised as loss. He nodded. Maybe it's time I started over. That night after he left, I stood on the porch and looked out at the quiet street. The wind chimes were still again. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry or betrayed, just tired and strangely free. Because somewhere between the silence and the heartbreak, I'd realized something. Losing people isn't the same as losing love. Love stays safe. It's real. It just learns to live somewhere quieter. A few weeks later, Daniel came by with flowers. For the garden, he said. Shyly, we planted them together. Side by side, our hands covered in dirt and sunlight when we finished. He stood back and said, You know, I think Dad would have liked this. I smiled. He would have. He liked anything that took root. Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening. Me too. And just like that, peace returned, not loudly, but gently. The way forgiveness does when it finally stops hurting sometimes. When I sit on the porch in the evenings, I still hear echoes of that day Clara's sharp tone at my door. Daniel's hesitant voice on the phone, the sound of papers rustling in my trembling hands. But those sounds don't sting anymore. They remind me that love, even when tested, has a way of reshaping itself into something sturdier. For a long time, I thought betrayal was the end of everything. That once trust was broken, the story was over. But I learned that it isn't the end. It's just the part where you finally see who people truly are. Daniel wasn't a bad son. He was just lost in someone else's idea of love. And Clara, for all her sharpness, wasn't a villain, either just a woman scared of losing control. Clinging to security in the wrong ways, life has a way of humbling all of us that way now. When Daniel visits, we don't talk about the past much. We sit quietly, drink tea, and watch the garden bloom again. The flowers he planted are growing taller every week. I think they're proof that, even after a harsh season, roots can still hold. Forgiveness didn't come easily to me. It came in slow breaths, long silences, and mornings where I had to remind myself not to stay angry. But forgiveness isn't something you give others first. It's something you give yourself, so you can breathe again. And that house, the one Clara once tried to seal it, still stands. The floors creak a little more now, but the light through the kitchen window is as warm as ever. Sometimes I wonder if Daniel will ever remarry, or if he's finally learned that love shouldn't come with conditions. But I don't ask. Some lessons are better lived than spoken. All I know is that when he hugs me goodbye now, it feels real again. Not out of guilt. Not out of fear. Just love, plain and simple. And that, I think, is enough. Would you have forgiven them if it were you? Tell me what you think in the comments below. And if you've ever lost someone to pride, but found peace again, remember, sometimes walking away isn't the end of love, it's the beginning of dignity. Thank you for listening, my dear ones. Until next time, take care of your heart, and it will take care of you.